Have you ever stopped to imagine what colonial America really smelled like? Not the scent of old parchment or polished wood floors in historic homes, but the raw, pungent reality of 17th and 18th century life. We're talking about a world without deodorant, indoor plumbing, or daily baths. A world where garbage rotted in the streets, chamber pots sloshed under beds, and body odor wasn't just common, it was expected. Forget the tidy oil paintings of powdered patriots or the soaring speeches about liberty. The truth is, everyday life in colonial America was far from glamorous. Behind the ideals of freedom and revolution was a world teeming with lice, disease, chamber pots, and questionable hygiene practices. It wasn't just the musket balls and redcoats that made life risky. Sometimes it was your neighbor's breath or your own socks. So what did it really mean to live in a world before toothpaste, toilet paper, or a daily shower? Let's scrub away the nostalgia and dig into the gritty, grimy, and sometimes gag-worthy details of what life actually smelled like in the American colonies. You might never look at a history museum the same way again. While the colonial era laid the foundations of a new nation, it also brewed up a reality few history books dare to mention. Colonial America reeked. Behind the ideals of independence and the scent of ink on parchment was an olfactory assault that modern noses would struggle to survive. Hygiene, as we understand it today, daily showers, minty toothpaste, antiperspirants, and hand sanitizer, was practically non-existent. Water was often thought to carry disease, so many colonists avoided full-body bathing for weeks or even months. Instead, they relied on quick rinses, perfume, or simply ignoring the problem. The result? A population marinating in its own natural musk. But cleanliness wasn't just about staying healthy or avoiding social embarrassment. It was deeply tied to religion, class, and character. To be clean was to be godly. Many believed that outward dirtiness reflected inward moral decay. Puritans, for example, saw personal discipline, including washing, as a sign of virtue. Meanwhile, the poor, who lacked access to clean water or fresh linens, were often labeled as lazy or sinful, reinforcing social divisions that quite literally stank of judgment. Even homes and streets contributed to the colonial stench. Animals wandered freely in many towns, privies overflowed, and garbage disposal was rudimentary at best. The air was a pungent stew of smoke, sweat, manure, and decay. And let's not forget the ever-present lice, fleas, and bedbugs that made personal cleanliness a daily uphill battle. So the next time you picture a powdered wig patriot drafting the Declaration of Independence, remember, he probably hadn't bathed in weeks, and he definitely smelled more like goat than glory. Colonial life didn't just smell bad, it crawled. Long before bug spray or window screens, settlers faced a nightly battle with insects that turned sleep into a contact sport. Bites, stings, and infestations were simply part of the fabric of everyday life in early America. Captain John Smith, one of Jamestown's earliest leaders and chroniclers, might be remembered for his diplomacy and derring-do, but his journals also paint a more pest-ridden picture. In between exploring rivers and avoiding starvation, Smith described being relentlessly swarmed by mosquitoes, attacked by clouds of flies, and pestered by the dreaded cockroach, a cockroach-like menace that made itself at home in food stores, beds, and clothing. Colonists may have dreamed of freedom, but they woke up to bites. Even the highest-ranking patriots weren't immune to the insect onslaught. In 1748, a young George Washington traveled west to survey land in the Shenandoah Valley. One particular night in a rustic log cabin proved so miserable that even his famously stoic nature cracked. His blanket, he wrote, was alive with lice and fleas. The infestation was so intolerable that Washington chose to sleep outside by a campfire rather than inside the cabin, finding the cold, wild outdoors preferable to a night among crawling vermin. The situation wasn't much better for missionaries trying to bring Christianity to the frontier. George Henry Loskiel, a Moravian missionary, described the torment of tiny, biting insects that earned the ominous nickname living ashes. Their bites burned so badly that victims said it felt like being touched by a red-hot coal. It wasn't hyperbole. These tiny torturers, likely a mix of no-see-ums, sand fleas, and midges, were so numerous and persistent they could drive people to madness. Bedbugs, lice, fleas, mosquitoes, ticks, you name it, the colonies had it. With no pesticides, few changes of clothes, and straw-filled mattresses that acted more like five-star resorts for bugs than bedding, colonists learned to live with a constant itch. Sleep wasn't peaceful, it was a battlefield. So while history may celebrate the bravery of those who settled the New World, it's worth remembering, Every night, these pioneers fought a silent, sleepless war, and most of the time, the bugs won. Forget candlelit bubble baths or steaming showers. Those are modern luxuries. In colonial America, full-body bathing was almost unheard of and often viewed with suspicion. In fact, if you were bathed from head to toe as an adult, it was likely because you were sick or dead. For babies, bathing was sometimes encouraged, but not for cleanliness. Newborns were dunked more to toughen them up than to scrub them down, as cold water was believed to build resilience. But once you outgrew the cradle, the practice of regular bathing dried up, literally. Most colonists didn't bathe. They washed, and even that was minimal. A splash of water to the face and hands in a basin was the standard daily routine. Full immersion in water was rare, and in some cases even feared. Many believed that bathing too often, especially in hot water, could weaken the body, open the pores to disease, or invite moral decay. Being too clean was sometimes considered dangerous. For the wealthy, a portable wooden tub might be hauled into the parlor or bedroom for a more involved sponge bath. But even then, the water would be reused by multiple family members, often starting with the father and ending with the youngest child. Soap, if it was used at all, was harsh and homemade, more like lye-laced paste than anything you'd want near your skin. As for the average farmer or laborer, a quick dip in a stream or river on a hot day was likely the closest thing to a bath. And even that wasn't about hygiene so much as cooling off. Winters meant months without even that. Come February, entire households might smell like smoke, sweat, dirt, and old wool. In short, the idea of smelling fresh would have been laughable to a colonist. Scented powders, herbs, and a well-placed handkerchief were your best bet for masking the musk. And if you ever wondered why everyone wore so many layers in those period paintings, it wasn't just fashion. It was a social barrier between bodies and odors. So next time you're enjoying your hot shower, be grateful. In colonial America, clean was more a state of mind than a physical reality. When it came to grooming, colonial women faced a double bind. They were expected to maintain a neat, modest appearance, but with tools and techniques that were, at best, crude and, at worst, lethal. Shaving, as we know it today, wasn't a regular part of a woman's beauty routine in 17th and 18th century America. But not because they didn't care. It's just that modesty handled most of the work. With long sleeves, full skirts, high collars and caps covering the head, very little skin was visible in public. The hair on women's legs, arms, or even underarms wasn't a concern simply because no one ever saw it. Out of sight, out of grooming. But that didn't mean colonial women ignored body hair altogether. In private or in wealthier households with stricter beauty standards, women turned to alternatives, plucking or homemade depilatory creams. And these weren't exactly your grandmother's cold wax strips. Recipes could include ingredients like quicklime calcium oxide, vinegar, or even arsenic. That's right. Poison was sometimes smeared directly onto the skin to melt away unwanted hair. The chemical burns were real. Smooth legs? Occasionally. Chemical injuries? Frequent. Hair removal wasn't the only risky business. Eyebrow shaping often meant singeing hairs with a smoldering taper or tweezing with makeshift tools. And forget shampoo. Many women used herbal rinses or even dusted their scalps with powder to absorb oil and odor. Hair was rarely washed and often styled in elaborate updos that doubled as homes for lice. Wealthier women might even sleep in caps to keep their powdered wigs or hairpieces neat between wears. The more elaborate the hair, the more effort it took to avoid a swarm of bugs moving in. Grooming in the colonial era wasn't about luxury or self-care. It was about survival, social standing, and not catching on fire while trying to look decent. And while beauty standards certainly existed, achieving them required a stomach for pain, a tolerance for toxic ingredients, and a hope that no one would notice the side effects. Dental care in colonial America was not just unpleasant, it was a waking nightmare. Toothaches were so common they were practically a rite of passage, and the treatments ranged from mildly ineffective to outright barbaric. When pain struck, most colonists turned first to folk remedies, herbal poultices made from cloves, mint or crushed garlic, or swishing strong liquor in the hopes of numbing the agony. Whiskey wasn't just for drinking, it was your anesthetic. But when the pain got unbearable, and it often did, extraction was the only option. And here's the kicker, dentists were rare. More often your tooth would be yanked out by someone with tools but no training, like the local barber, blacksmith, or even a neighbor with a strong grip and a rusty pair of pliers. No anesthesia, no sterilization, just a lot of grit and screaming. If you could afford it, you might replace that tooth with a denture. But 18th century dentures weren't the smooth porcelain numbers we know today. They were made from ivory, animal bone, or, brace yourself, human teeth, often purchased from the poor or taken from corpses after battle. Waterloo teeth became a real trade following European wars. Even George Washington, the paragon of patriotism, suffered. Despite the wooden teeth myth, his dentures were made from carved ivory, gold wire, and actual human and animal teeth. They fit poorly, caused constant pain, and over time pushed his lips outward, permanently altering the shape of his face. The father of his country, absolutely. The poster child for dental misery, him too.